Oh, look at how cool.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. James Lyons-Weiler coming to you live from the WWDNYK studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have a lot of things to talk about today. I'm going to going to bring her right on. Everybody, where did you go? Where's my screen? Oh, there you are. Okay, yeah. All right. So,
Hi.
Nadera, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for
You
having me, Jack. How are you
Oh,
doing?
sure. I'm doing fine. I'm doing absolutely fine. Enjoy getting things ready with you this morning. We have a good number of things to cover. One of the first, of course, is this week's winner of the Cloven Book One by Garth Stein. Now, just so people know that this is a graphic novel by the author of the number one New York Times bestseller, The Art of Racing in the Rain. That's the Garth Stein that wrote this, The Art of Racing in the Rain, and the co-creator of Stumptown. This is a beautifully rendered story of. See, it's a graphic novel. It's like a cartoon book. Each chapter in it grabs your attention so well that it takes me as long to get through one of these chapters as it would a book reading, because it engages the imagination so well. It's just a wonderful story. It's a story about people that were made, genetically modified humans, that were made in the lab on Vashon Island in Washington, and the government got wind of the fact that they were genetically modified and had certain changes to their body. They have hoofs. The reason why they have hoofs is because the genetic modification was to allow them to consume forage and leafy material that we humans can't consume, among other things to help with the hunger problem, help with global warming, and so on. Now, the person that created them, the scientist, was ordered to destroy them. And instead of destroying them, he actually released them into the mountains, into the forests of the Great Northwest, and they created a society. It's a fantastic story about people who are outcast from society based on a difference. And so, Garth is a genius to do this, and Matthew Southworth is the illustrator. Fantastic. So, I think we have 7 left. This week's winner has donated at patreon.com, WWDNYK, patreon.com/WWDNYK. That's the studio you're getting this feed from. This week's winner is Christina Roosman. Christina, congratulations. We'll be in contact. You've just received, you're going to receive an autographed copy of the Cloven Book 1. There's, I think, there's 2 more coming, so there'll be 3 books. So thank you for donating and supporting WDNYK. If you want to support this Unbreaking Science podcast, as well as the podcast Talk Nerdy to Me, and we have others in the queue, go over to patreon.com WWDNYK. You like that, eh? Talk Nerdy to Me.
I do.
Okay, I get a lot of laughs from that. So at the beginning here, what I want to do is, first of all, I want to bring up this event that we're going to talk about, the HPV COVID-19 Vaccine Safety Symposium, Making an Informed Decision. As you can see on the screen, we have Robert Kennedy Jr., James Lyons-Weiler, that's me, Judy Mikovits, Shannon Powers, Andrew Wakefield, and Destiny Menard. What do you expect people are going to get out of this symposium about the HPV vaccine, January 10th, 2021?
The most important goal with this and the intent behind this is for individuals to get the opportunity to be informed so they can make a decision for themselves and their loved ones. There's nothing better than being able to be empowered with knowledge and really honoring those tenets of informed consent. So this is a great opportunity for individuals to learn from experts who are going to be presenting the science candidly, unbiased, scientific information that will help them make a decision as to whether or not the Gardasil vaccine and the COVID-19 vaccines are a good decision for you or your loved ones.
Yeah, okay, so there's quite a diversity of speakers there. Each are going to have their own take on both the HPV and the COVID-19 vaccine safety. And so, I think it's a great service to society that you're doing this and bringing us all together like this, so we can have a balanced view and not just the one-sided propaganda, safe and effective. I mean, with the COVID-19 vaccine, they started, oh, don't worry about it, it's safe and effective, and then days into it, we saw over 3,000 serious adverse events being reported when it was just initially. We saw these lineup of Bell's palsy, which of course, in the trial they try to attribute those things to something else because they also happened in, the placebo arm, but the placebo wasn't necessarily, a true placebo. So I know in the Moderna case, it allegedly was, and I say allegedly because there were discrepancies in the formation of the placebo group in the HPV vaccine trials many years ago. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Judy Mikovits, Andrew Wakefield, and then Shannon Powers has a story about her daughter, and I'm going to have her on Breaking Science soon. Both of them are going to come here to Pittsburgh and show off their miracle baby. Her daughter, who was destined to never have a baby, actually now is a new mom. So I'm really excited, and we're going to learn from Destiny, I think, Menard, of her experience with the vaccine as well, right?
Right.
Okay, so for those of you that are looking again for those dates, this is January 10th, 2021. There's a Facebook page for this at the Health Freedom Ohio Facebook page. And you could go and find that, and you'll find how to sign up, how to buy tickets, and then I guess the actual location of the event is not being disclosed until like 24 hours before or something?
Correct, just to ensure everybody is well taken care of. And I also would like to note that that's going to be a power-loaded weekend. The day before, on the 9th, we're actually also going to be hosting the Time of Gratitude Dinner Fundraiser 1986 film screening and panel discussion, which is going to be featuring Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Andrew Wakefield. Lori as well, the producer of the film, is going to be there. It's going to be a great opportunity to not only continue this learning and process of empowerment, but also have a time of camaraderie and gratitude. All the proceeds are going to be benefiting Children's Health Defense and Crystal Clear Film Foundation, which are two organizations that we owe a debt of gratitude for their efforts on our behalf globally, quite frankly.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, great. Well, listen, people that want to throw around names and use terms like anti-vaccine have to understand that there are some people, as we now know, who are not just skeptical of the COVID-19 vaccine, but they're also being injured. And we saw the UK a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, say, if you've had an anaphylactic shock to vaccines, you shouldn't get this vaccine. At the same time, our people were saying, oh no, it's going to be fine if you've had an anaphylactic shock, get it. And what do we find? We find anaphylactic shock, and now they've updated it, and FDA says if you have had an anaphylactic shock from COVID-19 vaccine, you shouldn't get a second shot. So everything new under the sun, apparently. We don't really learn from one vaccine to another. We have to relearn it time and time and time again. This morning you'll be interested to know that $9.9 million has been commandeered from the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Trust Fund for vaccine injuries for COVID-19 so that they can administer and process the claims in the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. $9.9 million, when over 30 years they've paid out over $4.4 billion. $9.9 million is a drop in the bucket. So they're just going to be swamped with they're trying to double the staff at the NVICP in terms of special masters, so they know there's going to be this onslaught of claims. So
they know, even with their first year, they recommended that the individuals not get vaccinated till the weekends because there would be a shortage of staff as a result of these adverse reactions. And we know in some of the preliminary studies, when it comes to the high incidence of systemic adverse reactions, when we were talking about Moderna alone, we have 100% of those injected with a second dose experienced adverse reactions. 50% of the Pfizer candidates experienced adverse reactions. And when it comes to the AstraZeneca and the vaccine, you have with just the one single dose, you have 50% of the candidates experiencing adverse reactions, and then you have the Johnson & Johnson. These are just the leading candidates, right? Where one dose caused almost 2/3 of adverse reactions among those under 55, and almost 1/3 among those over 65, which is outrageous. And then part of, I know, the conversation that we're going to have coming up here is some of those FDA guidance for providers and such for administering the Pfizer vaccine and who they want to include, which is all the more alarming because of this. But you also mentioned, and I'm sorry, Jack, but I have to note this because I think it's prudent that the public know when it comes to these anaphylactic reactions that we're experiencing. And I noticed that they want to undermine them. I think it's important to note that not only did they recommend that anybody that has any food or allergies to any medication not take the vaccine, but there is an ingredient in the vaccine which is alarming, and that's the polyethylene glycol. And over 70% of individuals have antibodies to PEG. So this creates that alarming scenario where people are prone or potentially more prone to these allergic reactions. You have a high rate of the population. It's a product that it's found in food, cosmetics, other medications and such. And one of the things that alarms me from this as well is that I see individuals within the medical field who are receiving these vaccinations and experiencing these adverse anaphylactic reactions is that they intend to take the second one. And when we understand the IgE response that occurs when individuals develop an allergic reaction to that severity, I mean, you already intensified that IgE response even more so with that vaccination. And then you're going to take the second one. I am truly, truly very concerned.
Well, we should be concerned. I mean, I have an article that should be coming out in the Defender pretty soon that shows the 94.5% efficacy of the Moderna vaccine is an overestimate because they actually, if I'm running a clinical trial on, say, a chemotherapy agent, and it's a scheduled dose with the first scheduled dose and a second scheduled dose, and people die or they drop out between doses, I have to accommodate that in my analysis. All right. So if somebody dies, I have to count that towards the death rate, in the efficacy and safety, comparative efficacy of the chemotherapy agent. My analysis, they said that 16. In terms of the efficacy, they claimed that there were 16 infected out of the 28,000 participants. But if you actually drill down deep into the data, Moderna had 81 participants in the vaccine arm and 118 participants in the placebo arm that developed COVID-19 diagnosis before the second dose. And they just dropped those patients from the analysis.
How convenient.
They fell through the cracks. And so those people, if you include them in, according to my calculations, the efficacy drops from 94.5% to 75.4%. 75.4% is not the kind of numbers that, if these results didn't survive peer review. We know all about this simply because they put it into a press release initially. So that should be a forward-looking statement, and there's issues with that. And again, if I had a chemotherapy agent and I dropped out the people that died after the first dose, the people that made it to the second dose, mortality only, okay, that would be illegitimate. And I also noted that they claim that there were only 13 deaths overall in the entire study, 6 in the vaccinated and 7 in the unvaccinated. But if you look at the overall death rate for the population, in the study, the study groups all together, and that there's myocardial infarction. We now know that there's myocardial infarction caused by the virus, and we see those cases, and we can understand why. And I'm in contact with a lot of doctors over that, and I've read the literature on that. We may be doing a special on breaking science on that, a rapid grand rounds. But if you look at the death rates reported in the vaccine arms of Moderna and Pfizer, 6 people in the Moderna trial died, where only 2 people in the Pfizer study trial died. But in Moderna, it's 6 people over 56 days. In the Pfizer trial, it's 2 people over 199 days. So there's a 5.1 times greater risk with the Moderna vaccine. You haven't heard anybody say that because nobody's published that. So this is the first time I'm making this published. This will all be in my article. But more importantly, I think the fact is, both Moderna and Pfizer's death rates are so far below the national death rate so far below, study-wide, they're so far below that it's 6.3 times greater national death rate in the same age group population, just from any other cause. So these people are not dying. They're super, super healthy. These are superheroes. These are like super soldiers. Absolutely no prior anaphylaxis with any vaccine, no food allergies, right? They're super, super healthy people. And so the exclusion criteria means that the death rates that we see in the vaccine are not representative of the death rates that we're going to see in the entire population. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just saying they know it, the FDA knows it, and so on. But when they put their propaganda out, they say that this is safe and effective. They don't know what they're talking about. Any politician that's out there, any propagandist that's out there saying these vaccines are safe and effective, they really don't know what they're talking about. You've got to get into the data, you've got to analyze it, you've got to say, is the study population representative of the entire population? And it's not just a footnote to say, yeah, they use the healthiest ones. We're talking about efficacy versus effectiveness, efficacy being on the ideal population, effectiveness we'll find out in the long term. These statistics that they have are not representative, and basically there's zero data on what the effects of this vaccine on the entire population. There's zero data. That's not credible data, zero data on any sample that's representative from the population. Those data are now coming in, unfortunately, in the form of vaccine adverse events and vaccine-related deaths. So let's pray and hope that that is super safe and effective. But the indications so far that there's problems. So okay, so let's get to the meat of our discussion here. You wanted to talk about an announcement made by a county advisory bulletin. Can you tell me about that? Coming out of Ohio. Which county was this from?
This is actually published by the County Commissioners Association of Ohio. So this went out to everybody. It's on the County Advisory Bulletin. And one of the things that I'm going to prefix by stating is that if anybody has taken the time to review the CDC COVID-19 plan, as well as each and every state's plan, we know that part of their plan is to resort to stakeholders and county commissioners to push the coercion of the vaccine consumption. And I will here proceed by reading exactly what this states. And you can see the first question there, you have it up. It states, can a study require its employees to receive the COVID-19 vaccination as a condition of continued employment? The answer provided is yes. In general, there are no legal prohibitions that prevent a county from requiring its employees to get the COVID-19 vaccination once it's available. Because employees with COVID-19 can present a direct threat to others in the workplace, counties have more leeway to impose such a requirement. Both the CDC and EOC guidance support, which, by the way, I have the updated guidance from the EOC, the direct threat standard. Listen to those words, the direct threat standards. Counties can require employees to provide verification they have received 2 doses required by the vaccination to be effective. I mean, this is unfathomable. In a country where we pride ourselves to honor the tenets of freedom, this is anything but. So I understand, and based on my advocacy, that businesses have their own personhood and such, and therefore, they do not want to impose anything on the business. But when we're talking about injecting a biologic into human beings, which are indemnified from liability because they know there's risks associated with those products, to try to enforce any sorts of mandates, whether through law or in this case through coercion, it is, as unethical as you can get. We have learned nothing from World War II and what led to the necessity for the Nuremberg Court.
One of the things that struck me most about this memo was the date that it was published. It was published in December 2020. And there was no data. There were no data that was relevant for the general population. We're just learning now about the fact that people that have anaphylactic shock from this vaccine, the FDA says no, they shouldn't get it. The FDA updated its guidelines. So this county advisory bulletin kind of makes a carte blanche assumption, in my view, that the workplace is going to be safer if it's filled with vaccinated people, as opposed to, people who are injured by vaccines. If your workplace suffers because the people are injured, they've lost work, they have to stay home, and that's what we see with the data. We see they're calling them now health-related events, health-related incidents, or something like that. And the technical definition of that is that after the vaccine, they specifically are unable to work. So if the qualifications for you to maintain your job at the county level is that you have to subject yourself to a vaccine which may cause you to be unable to work, I think it would arguably, this is a presumption that vaccines are safe rather than a data-driven perspective. And vaccines are safe for everyone. And so very interesting that this is coming down to such a fine point of a threat to safety in the workplace. If a requirement is that you be exposed to a risk in the workplace, then that risk must be lower than the risk of the infection. So I think it would be incumbent upon the county to demonstrate that the risk of the vaccine is lower than the risk of the infection. Now, the rates that are coming in, however, in terms of serious illness that are causing people not to be able to work, the serious illness rate of the infection it depends on your age. If you're less than 70 years old, it's basically zero, right? There are some instances of people that have serious illness from COVID-19. But if you're below the retirement age, isn't it ironic? There's a retirement age of 65. Why is there a retirement age of 65? Because people lose a lot of work. Why do they lose a lot of work? Because respiratory viruses make them sick, and they miss a lot of work days. They become unreliable. So that's part of it. There's also cancer-related work loss, and so on. There's just age-related decay of abilities of a person's ability to stay in the workforce. So I think let's take. Are there other points about this that you wanted to address?
Yes, actually, there is the EOC that was also released recently with an updated guidance on this. And it states that if an employee cannot get vaccinated for COVID-19 because of disability or sincerely held religious belief, practices, or observance, and there is no reasonable accommodation possible, then it would be lawful for the employer to exclude the employee from the workplace. Now, again, we see this language playing along here, right? So although we continuously see in the media know that we're not going to mandate it, there is encouragement to assert individuals' rights and freedoms, particularly when it comes to their bodily autonomy and informed consent through this process. Like you said, there is no transparency in data. We have done already the public, both the American and global public, a huge disservice by not having that transparency. And we're talking about a virus that has over 99% survivability rate among the general public and over 98% among those who are immunocompromised. And I think it's also important to note that you mentioned there the date of the county advisory bulletin, that this was released recently. The vaccines, personally, I will say not for me, not that it says much to me, but they are not FDA approved. They actually went through by the emergency use authorization, Act. So, and part of that emergency use authorization is that it cannot be mandated by states, of course, but we know that they're going to be seeking licensures very soon. So this is something that I would encourage individuals to get ahead of and talk to your county commissioners, talk to your religious leaders, because they are also listed among the stakeholders to push this agenda. And we need to be able to preserve our rights, because we know very well what's occurred nationwide, particularly in the state of New York. So they've taken a lot of basically what's going on in those areas, and they're trying to undermine our religious rights and liberties, aside from that of the moral just aspect of my body, my choice, right?
Right, absolutely. So let's take a look at this again, a little bit more detail here. I want to join in you in this. The second question in the county-wide announcement is: are there any health-related issues to be concerned with? And it says yes, as other work requirements, accommodations could be made under the Americans with Disability Act. No, must be made, not could be made. Must be made. Specifically, it is possible that an employee may have an underlying health condition that prevents them from receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. if an employee raises this issue, the county should treat it as the same as other ADA issues. That's not how this should be handled. They should say, the FDA currently says, if you have had an anaphylactic shock, anaphylactic episode from this vaccine, you cannot exclude them from the workplace. And then it goes on to say, first, the county is entitled to documentation supporting the physical and mental impairment. Why do we need a nanny state? Why does the county need to know documentation? Second, the county should engage in the interactive process to determine if there are any reasonable accommodations. What are they talking about, reasonable accommodations? Do not presume that there are no accommodations available. Depending on the situation, additional social distancing, teleworking, or leave could be accommodations. Telework? So we're creating this two-class tiered society. If you have a disability, you have to work from home. If you have your immune system is so primed from all the aluminum that you have, that your Th2 skewed, that you're going to have an anaphylactic reaction to these unsafe epitopes, which we know shouldn't be in the vaccines. This is a ridiculous, dual class. There's civil rights issues here. Don't you agree?
Completely. And actually, there's another section on here on page 2 under the third questions. And within the answer, it states that the employer is entitled to evidence that the employee has a sincerely held religious belief about the vaccine. As with the ADA, an employer can deny a religious exemption only if it creates undue hardships. That begs a lot of questions, correct? Employers do not have to accommodate employees with certain medical beliefs about vaccinations outside of the sincerely held religious context, which that is nothing new there. But
if you could actually do math and calculate the risk of the vaccine relative to the risk to you from the infection, they're saying that you yourself are presenting an immediate threat. Is
correct. So healthy individuals are presenting an immediate threat.
Okay, so they're treating the unvaccinated, perfectly healthy people as immediate threat when there's zero evidence that asymptomatic transmission occurs. In fact, there's a study of 1 million people out now. A study of 1 million people found no evidence of asymptomatic transmission. There's a study from China. They followed 1 million people. Hundreds of thousands of people in the original study. 300 came down with COVID-19 without symptoms, and they contact traced everybody for 300 people. They found no evidence of asymptomatic transmission. So the problem is that you have to have high viremia. You must have high viremia, which means you are sick in order to transmit. The public needs to make that connection. Don't be afraid of every individual that you see. It's like the LA County eating outdoors case that I said, listen, most people that are going out to eat outdoors, first of all, outdoor transmission is nothing. Second of all, if they're well enough to go outside, they're probably not with high viremia. If you have high viremia with virus, you're most likely going to be sick. So the healthy people who are not vaccinated are being treated as an imminent threat. I think that's a point of contention. Do you have any input from any of your legal advisors on this in Ohio?
Yes, I actually sent it to an individual who has dealt with these kind of cases professionally, and I'm going to read the response that I received. So on skimming this, it appears the article is simply repeating the law, which allows room for employers to show undue hardships as a basis for firing employees who refuse the vaccine. There was already a high-pressure approach concerning flu shots for healthcare workers. For example, and the emergency nature of the declared pandemic and declared emergencies provided an easy way for employers to disallow all but the most extreme medical exemptions for this one. They were already overstepping legal lines with the flu shots, so it's more likely they'll go even further with the COVID vaccines. The EEOC will be flooded with cases. They'll take years to play out, and they're already backed up due to the ongoing lockdowns. And in most situations, you have to go through the EEOC before you can sue, assuming you'd be willing to sue. I've communicated with the EEOC on several occasions on behalf of clients, and they ignore the law, even their own attorneys in some situations. I'm not expecting much help from the EEOC with COVID vaccines.
Okay, so thank you. Look, everybody that lives in Ohio needs to take a look at this county advisory bulletin. I presume there's a link that you can share.
Absolutely. I can post after.
Sure, sure. It's published by the County Commissioners Association of Ohio. If you want their website, it's www.ccao.org. If you want to call and you want to register your outrage at this incorrect, misleading advice, there's a couple of things that they're overlooking when they claim that there are no. This is what struck me. There are no legal restrictions on the county to require this or employers to require this. Actually, there are. At the federal level, there's the federal regulations that require every person that's involved in any medical experimentation on human subjects. That federal regulation actually provides you with the ability to say no. And there should be, specifically, it states there can be no consequences to you if you opt out on the basis of the fact that the long-term vaccine studies are, in fact, a human subjects experiment. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm just disagreeing with the county advisory bulletin. If you're going to take legal action in any way, anyone, you need to consult with somebody that's authorized and on the board in your state. But the federal regulations, if anybody wants to find them, go to the petition.com site and just Google Free Rebecca Berdow. That's the argument that we put in the petition when I delivered 7,000 signatures to get Rebecca Berdow of Michigan out of jail for allegedly refusing a court order to vaccinate. The court order actually went to the wrong address. It went to the wrong lawyer. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, she got out early. She was released on, the judge said it was on good behavior. I think the judge basically crapped her pants when she read that she was party to violations of informed consent in federal regulations for human experimentation. I think the judge didn't know that post-market surveillance studies do qualify as human subjects experimentation, and the public needs to know that unless your doctor tells you, by the way, as part of the informed consent process, after they hand you the vaccine information statements, not before, they have to hand you the vaccine information statements before they vaccinate. They should also be telling you, by the way, you're by agreeing to be vaccinated, you are de facto enrolling your child in a post-market surveillance human subjects experimentation on this experimental vaccine. They should be telling you that, and they don't tell that to anyone. So they are, in fact, denying you informed consent at two levels, in my opinion. Take it for what it is. I think it's an angle worth exploring. The county might change their tune if they're informed about the federal regulations regarding informed consent for human experimentation. So the EEOC release, updated guidance, seems to water down the stance that the reason why we have the EEOC in the first place. It seems to water it down, right? By the way, there's this other group of people that are going to show up and they're not going to want to vaccinate because of religious reasons, but it has to be proven that those are genuine religious beliefs. How do you prove that a religious, a matter of faith is genuinely held? I mean, does the state have the authority under the Constitution to judge whether or not you actually believe in your particular religion or your faith or your God? This is incredible that this exists in the United States. It's unfathomable that these people think that they have the authority to do that when under the Constitution it's really clear that they should stay the fuck out of. Sorry,
Correct.
Bernadette. Bernadette. Stay the f out of our personal lives when it comes to matters of faith.
Absolutely. Jack, I want to also point out, because this is something that has impacted all counties, and not only that, we've been talking about the issue of transparency in data collecting and reporting, correct?
Yeah.
Because decisions are being made that impact the lives of countless, and you don't have only the issues of individuals in the health realm, but also as it extends to issues of starvation, domestic abuse. I mean, the list goes on and on. Suicide, addiction. So I would like to point out, in Pike County here in Ohio, they had released earlier on, sometime, I think it was in the summer, yes, July 2nd, that the onset of symptoms when they went back to their data for COVID-19 started on November 12, 2019. They later on, some individuals were trying to argue that was incorrect. But what they didn't know, and I should have sent this to you. I don't know if you can see it.
I can't see
No?
it. Just go ahead and read
Okay.
it.
So this is actually an email exchange, a message exchange with Pike County General Health District in regards to that. And the question was asked by the brilliant Lisa Knapp as to whether or not the COVID-19 cases, why were they not included in the ODH data? This was their response. They're not counting anything before January 1st, 2020. Several other health departments have antibody tests that were positive in December, also that were not included. So when inquired as to when it was sent to them, that was their response, the ODH's response. Pike County responded, we entered into ODRS and they changed it. We asked why and we're told that they are not counting any antibody tests prior to January 1st, 2020. Again, this is all the more reasons for I think two things, right? One is this virus has been around for a period of time. It's now in individuals' realm of awareness, but in a way where there's a lot of data that has been conveniently neglected for an agenda that seems very clear to me.
You could go ahead and be specific about that. I mean, there's no point to beating around the bush. If there's a particular type of data, what's the type of data that's been neglected, do you think?
The fact that this virus has been around for a while. And there's also data in regards to assuming cases of COVID-19
Big time.
Instead of actual proven cases. So one of the things that we received, because part of the work that we do, we're connected with practitioners and individuals in the medical field and even frontline workers, is that the Ohio Medical Advisory Board actually sent an email out to practitioners advising them to count assumed, not confirmed cases of COVID-19. We also know that you have negative cases that are being counted as positive, and of course you have the entire failure of the entire testing process.
Yeah, totally. So there's a definite exaggeration of the problem. In fact, there's the study, the peer-reviewed study of the CDC's behavior about changing their practice of counting COVID-19 cases with COVID-19 versus died from. Everything goes over to died from. There's a $40,000 incentive, perverse incentive for every COVID case that if somebody requires hospitalization from respiratory illness, they're going to call it COVID because they get $40,000, even if it's not COVID. Influenza's gone. It's cured influenza. It's just gone completely. So IPAC actually has an ongoing analysis in which we deconvolve from past year's data the expected number of non-COVID respiratory virus cases, and we take that out of the COVID-19 cases about a worst case scenario. And when you look at the number of deaths that are attributed to COVID-19, it appears that after our correction, you correct for population size change over time, you correct for the false positive rate, a very modest 11% false positive rate, which we suspect is much higher. It appears that most respiratory viral illnesses in the excess death category are should be attributed to non-coronavirus respiratory illnesses like bacterial pneumonia. If you get a COVID-19 diagnosis for your respiratory ailment and it's actually bacterial pneumonia, you're probably not going to get antibiotics for it. And if you are given antibiotics and a COVID-19 diagnosis, something is desperately wrong. So you should not get antibiotics for COVID-19. It's a virus. Antibiotics are not going to touch it. So, and I'm hearing so many cases of people that were in a hospital. They were thrown out of the hospital, sent home, and then they were readmitted, and every time they come back in, they're readmitted 2 or 3 times, they're given a diagnosis of COVID-19, and they don't have COVID-19. So you could kind of wonder if the fact that the hospital's shut down, they don't have their elective surgeries are shut down during the lockdown. They only COVID-19 medicine was being practiced, then what's a for-profit corporation going to do? They're going to make sure that every exchange that they have with the patient is a possible contribution to their profit center. And this is really disgusting because it causes people to have COVID-19 care when they have influenza. We really need in the United States to grow up our differential diagnosis of respiratory illness. There's no reason in the world why people can't know exactly the virus that they have. It's really subpar. It's really an embarrassment. It's an international embarrassment that we're so bad at differential diagnosis of respiratory illness. It's time that we grow up. So I'm starting to reach out to the medical community in respiratory illnesses and cardiovascular illnesses to really get a handle on what's really happening here and to try to help out.
Correct. We have nurses, frontline nurses, that have revealed that individuals with so much as like a sore throat or, barely a cough are getting admitted because they receive, larger amounts of money. So again, you mentioned how these, all of a sudden we have no more influenza concerns going on, but the CDC actually recently revealed that they are combining the cases of pneumonia, influenza, and COVID-19. And of course, this benefits that increase in mortality rate that's being reported without actually breaking down the facts that are relevant. And back in August, the CDC also revealed that out of 157 plus cases of COVID-19 deaths at the time that were being counted, only 6% were really attributed to COVID-19. So you have all those different factors, as you noted, playing around. And I will say it till I'm blue in the face. We need, and the public deserves, transparency in data and reporting. My background is journalism and political science. With that comes a passion for unbiased research and reporting. I mean, for goodness sake, we are the fourth estate. And we owe it to the people to honor that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pfizer should have also reported that there were 10 times the adverse event rate in older adults than in the younger adults. I found that's published in an article in The Defender. There's so many people that are around the country that are doing the job of the CDC, doing the job of the FDA, doing the job of the mainstream press, doing the job. It's like a watchdog network. It's an intelligentsia. And it's all because we understand by talking with people, firsthand experience in many people's case, but talking with people and meeting people, and talking with the parents of people who have lost their children to vaccines. I can't imagine what it must be like for a parent or a parent to hear from their employer, you're going to lose your job unless you take this vaccine after having already lost a child. I can't imagine what that must feel like. I can imagine because I did meet Danette Bailey, and I spoke with Michael Bailey Jr., and I spoke with Bailey, Michael Bailey Sr.'s daughter. I can imagine what it's like for a man like Michael Bailey from Ohio to be forced to vaccinate after refusing in writing, letting them know there's something different about me, I'm concerned about this, I've never had a single day of illness or something strange about my immune system. 3 months before his retirement, and then succumbing to a vaccine injury where he became paralyzed. And I can't imagine that. And that was done in Ohio to this person, to this family. They lost Michael Bailey. And there are going to be people who take this vaccine and die because they're trying to make a living. If you're concerned about coronavirus and you're in a workplace, and you're willing to sacrifice the life of your coworkers so that you don't have a mild cold, which is what coronavirus is for you if you are less than 65. It's for most people by far. And if the only reason why it's not for some people is because they're unhealthy, they don't exercise right, they eat too much sugar, they smoke, they have diabetes, etc., etc. These are the people that have Th2 skew in their immune system. If you're concerned about that, don't put it on other people, and don't put the risk of your undue unwillingness to take good care of yourself. Look at the protocols for preventing coronavirus vaccine, serious coronavirus illness. Understand that Dr. Anthony Fauci, this is the other thing, absolutely came out and said that the vaccines probably won't prevent transmission. If the vaccines don't prevent transmission, then what's the point of having workplace mandates? And I believe that the climate is not right for mandates. I believe it so strongly that for the first time in my life, I wrote to ACIP after they approved, recommended the coronavirus vaccines. They recommended them, and then I wrote to them afterwards and I said, well, now that you've done that, you probably want to update that and let the world know that you don't think perhaps this should be done as a mandate. A couple of days later, they held a second meeting and they had a discussion. And they said, perhaps this shouldn't be a mandate. But in my message to them, I said, you might want to reconsider this for every single vaccine that you have recommended, because unless you take away this idea that mandates are an option, because they have the rule of law by decree, ACIP, if they recommend any vaccine, it immediately becomes the rule of law in every state that doesn't have exemptions. That's too much power for any committee to have over hundreds of millions of people. I asked them to back off on that, and so hopefully they'll put out a statement where they say, for the measles, mumps, and rubella, while we recommend it, we don't support a mandate. If ACIP withdraws their support for their implicit support of mandates, they can no longer be used as a justification for mandates. And so hopefully they'll take the message to heart. They did have a discussion. They put it out there that, you know what, this may be something we want to think about in terms of maybe it's not the right vaccine for a mandate. But no vaccine is the right vaccine for a mandate. They're all under post-market surveillance. They're all under constant human subject experiments. And so, you know, if people are thinking clearly about this, if you haven't heard this stuff before and this is the first time you're hearing about this, there's so many people that have talked about this for the past 3 or 4 years. There's Del Bigtree on the High Wire. There's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at Children's Self Defense. There's National Vaccine Center. I'm going to leave people out. If I leave you out, I'm sorry. But there's a huge groundswell of vaccine risk awareness. And don't let them call you vaccine hesitant if you're vaccinating it. If you say, oh, you know what, I'll take everything but the HPV vaccine. Or, you know what, I'll take everything but coronavirus. It just was too fast. Understand this. This is status quo. The coronavirus vaccine was developed under status quo. It took longer for the other vaccines, but it's status quo. This is how they do it. They don't do long-term randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials. And there's hope on the way. There are a lot of treatments, like ivermectin. And there's a groundswell of support for hydroxychloroquine plus ivermectin. There's other protocols, like the Brownstein protocol. There's other nutraceuticals that are going to be studied, where they will be a viable alternative. Why is it that we codify in things like this from the county, that as if vaccines are the only option? Where's the mandate to make sure that you have to take ivermectin before you come to work? Where's that? They don't even put that on the approved treatments. So if you're going to minimize treatment value, it's because you're trying to mandate vaccines, and that's an agenda. And I think that's what you're talking about earlier, that there's a specific agenda to increase vaccine uptakes, to increase the market for vaccines because it's so profitable. The government basically pays for everything and there's no liability. So
correct, and there's no profit in cures. And to go along with what you were saying when it comes to transmission, but actually let me just step back a little bit, because you're talking about all these treatments as well. I know medical professionals in the field that, for reasons of preserving the right to help and their patients, they have used hydroxychloroquine among their patients effectively, successfully. And you have, the Emergency Use Authorization Act. One of the things that amazes me about it, right, it's under situations of emergency, they can approve items or authorize the use of medical products that are not approved by the FDA. And also they can approve products that have been around for a while but have not approved for the use for certain things like coronavirus and such, which we talk about hydroxychloroquine. So
you're talking about off-label use. That's
off-label use, correct?
Yeah, that's legit. Sure.
Right. So I find it interesting how they pick and choose how they're going to do this. Why do we not talk about how to promote and strengthens individuals' immune system. We know that up to 80% of individuals with coronavirus are deficient in vitamin D. That is in the scientific literature. That is a fact. There's many ways that we can improve our immune system where we are better able to coexist as we're meant to be. We are not, we are surrounded by microbes every day. We actually need them for our survivability, correct? I love listening to Dr. Zach Bush. I could never reiterate his brilliance the way that he does, but it's somebody who really has the importance of this relationship that we have with the environment and how our innate immune system has the capability, given the opportunity, to really do what it needs to do and be able to live in harmony. And we have these vaccines that, quite frankly, that there's flawed trial designs, not only in terms of the fact that the tests have not been designed to know whether or not they truly prevent transmission, but none of the leading vaccine candidate trials are designed to test that the vaccine can reduce the severe COVID-19 symptoms, which were defined as hospital admissions, ICUs, and deaths. And then you have the entire issue that, again, none of the vaccine eliminates, candidates have eliminated unsafe epitopes. So, the part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus proteins that can emulate human proteins and can lead the way to these, immunocompromised situations. So there's a lot to be considered here for individuals as they're making decisions moving forward. I think above, first and foremost, is really understand how to support your immune system and live in harmony. And fear does nobody any good. Now, does that minimize the fact that there are individuals who have been affected by this? Yes, absolutely, impacted by this in ways that it's tragic. But I think with those individuals, we need to support them in those ways as well. There is a way of making decisions and policies that take everybody's well-being into consideration. The immunocompromised, those who are vulnerable, those who are essential. Everybody's essential in their right to work and provide for their families and live in right.
They're just trying to eat here.
Well-being.
Just trying to eat here. Just trying to pay the bills. Just trying to pay the rent. Just trying to heat my home. I mean, these are not essential, right? It's more important that everybody in the workplace have a vaccine than for people to actually be able to feed their children. This myopic view is a problem in terms of a balance of risk understanding, and you're going to hear this a lot from me over the next month. That the way that what's wrong with the problem of solving the problem of coronavirus and every other infectious agent with vaccines only is that it confuses a balance of risk problem and tries to solve a balance of risk problem with a cost-benefit analysis. And when you do this, and we're about to wake up, folks, in 2021. If you apply this logic, you're going to see this over and over and over again. What happens when you make the mistake and you say, there's risk to the vaccine, there's risk to the virus, and you apply risk-benefit analysis to that, then what you end up doing is you dichotomize the issue. You have the people that choose one over the other. And so the only strategy that people know is to minimize the perception of risk from the vaccine and maximize the perception of risk from the virus, or vice versa. I've seen it in the anti-vaccine community. They maximize the risk from the vaccine and they minimize the risk from the virus. And so you get this polarization and it pulls society apart. There's no need for this. Because in balance of risk, you admit that both have risks. And so you're trying to optimize what part of the population should be vaccinated, which part shouldn't be vaccinated. We're not allowed to say that in the United States. There's no part of the population that should not be vaccinated. And because we're not allowed to say that, we're not allowed to think in terms of balance of risk. And if you start applying this to all the social issues that divide us socially in politics, you're going to see a much more peaceful United States of America. You're going to see a disempowerment of the people that use and exploit this inability of people to understand the problem that they're in. And then people, when they can't solve this, they get emotional. And when you get emotional, you activate that amygdala. You start taking it personally. You start blaming the person. That's where the ad hominem attacks. Well, this person doesn't care about me. This person doesn't think that I'm important. My view's not important. They're minimizing. Well, guess what? Another aspect of applying the balance, risk balance analysis when you have a balance of risk problem is that by minimizing the perception of risk of one of the problems, and maximizing the perception of risk and only solving this part of the problem, it leads to ultimate destruction. And an analogy is like you have a boat, you're out on the lake, and you'll only bail out the front part of your boat. And you don't take care of the hull. You're just bailing out the front part of your boat. And you got two holes, and you have two holes in the boat, and you only seal one. And you go, okay, everything's fine now. You're going to sink your boat. And so this is how we need to start thinking about talking with our legislators about this, our doctors, our neighbors. And you say, listen, I recognize that COVID-19 does kill some people. I recognize it does make some people very sick. I recognize that there is long haulers in COVID-19, and it's probably due to pathogenic priming. And you can educate them about pathogenic priming, which you were talking about with the unsafe epitopes. And say, there's a solution to this. We can take the unsafe epitopes out. You can tell your employer, I'm waiting for a vaccine that doesn't have unsafe epitopes, and then cite the paper on pathogenic priming. Because I peer-reviewed 3 vaccines development studies that took the unsafe epitopes out. They're coming. No, you might not ever want to take any vaccine for the rest of your life, and I understand that. I understand that. But the point is, you can at least buy some time, and you can say, hey, there's alternatives. Why are these vaccines, which actually only have potentially in terms of Moderna 74.5% efficacy, and they didn't take out the unsafe epitopes, and we're seeing these risks to the tunes of probably tens of thousands now around the world. Let's wait till the safety data's in. I don't want to be part of that safety study. Where's my rights? Ask your employer, where do I stand on the right to opt out of that? And you might get a harsh response. You might get a harsh response that says, in the United States of America, we can fire you for any reason, any reason at all. And we don't have to tell you why. That means labor is dead in the United States. There's bigger problems here. There are much bigger problems. The way that we've structured society, that you could be let go from your job for no reason at all. Even if they just don't have to tell you that it was related to your vaccine stance. This is wrong. And so, people have learned the hard way through pain and suffering, as you well know. Pain and suffering, risk of death, almost losing a child, losing a loved one, losing a spouse. We're better than this. We're far, far better than this as a country. We're far better. We need to take care of everyone. And you said that earlier, and I agree with you 100%.
Correct. At the end of the day, these are important conversations that everybody should be having. And above everything else, we should honor and preserve not only our constitutional rights that are God-given rights, right, above all else, but also, that right to informed consent is so crucial, especially we're talking about, yes, you assess risk, but we are talking about products that are indemnified from liability. And again, that is part of that risk. And why? The only product in the United States protected from liability because of the injuries and deaths that they were causing. And ever since, we go back to the 1986 Act that indemnified the entire industry from liability. The chronic health conditions within our children have increased drastically from over 12% to over 54%. These are also questions that we should be looking into. Definitely. And really trying to protect our population, individuals, humanity.
Yeah. So the very, very good news is that coronavirus has woken up so many people in positions of power, including judges. Here's the ruling from Stickman. It didn't necessarily stick, but even in an emergency, the authority of government is not unfettered. The Constitution cannot accept the concept of a new normal where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigation measures. The other thing I wanted to share with you, when I was talking about that false dichotomization and confusing balance of risk with risk-benefit, this is what happens. The Boston Herald, May 8th, 2017, I took this from Jeffrey Jackson, calling for parents debating vaccination to be hung for debating vaccination. Well, when I saw that, I put out like my address and I said, come get me, because we have to have open debate in society. We will win at least the right to continue to give these complex issues due consideration. If you want to shut down free speech in the United States of America, you've got the entire population of the United States of America to fight with. Because there are plenty of people outside of the United States that would love for us to shut down free speech. There are plenty of enemies outside. We don't need people who say that they're friends to America to come in and tell us that for our own good we shouldn't talk about issues that literally affect the health of every living American. And you can imagine what scenarios I might be implying, but it's very important that we understand that if there is an attack on the United States with a bioweapon, they're not going to want us to understand what's happening. And how can we understand what's really happening? I'm not saying there is a bioweapon. I'm not saying that COVID-19 is a bioweapon. I'm saying if there does come one. So we need to restructure public health in the United States of America completely with intelligence, designed to be intelligent, designed to give due and subtle consideration to these complex issues. And, when you feel yourself getting angry at somebody, understand that's because you're confused, that you think you're trying to solve a problem. If they can only understand my view, well, the solution to that is to understand their view and find out what part of their view might be a little bit correct, where it might be a little, and try to balance both risks. And if it turns out that the actual risk from vaccines is in this vaccine is much higher than the infection for a population of interest, then so be it. So be it. So let's have that conversation, and I want to thank you for helping to bring that forward, Nadera.
Absolutely, my pleasure. As you know, I come from a country where we have lost a lot of our constitutional rights, and everything started actually with censorship, as I think back to what was going on in Venezuela during that time. And I can tell you from experience that when that begins to happen, it's very alarming. And I lived during a time where we thought it could never happen here. So when I hear that, to me, quite frankly, it's like reliving a nightmare, and it's alarming. We need to be vigilant. We can't just sit back and hope and pray that it won't happen. We have to ensure that we preserve our constitutional rights and freedoms, every single one of them. Otherwise, we all lose as a whole.
Yeah, that's very beautifully stated. I don't often quote David Icke because he's so controversial. And I'm not dismissing anything he's ever contributed. I'm just saying I don't often quote him. But David Icke, I recently heard him say that the fascists are in a minority. They don't have the numbers. The fascists who are in control, who tell ACIP how to vote, who tell doctors what they can and cannot say, the vaccine promoters who stand to lose or win billions of dollars, that have undertaken regulatory capture in the EPA, in the NIH, in the CDC, and the FDA. They're a vast minority. They're a tiny, tiny, tiny group of people, and they're not the ones to fear. That they don't perpetuate fascisms. It's the ones that self-activate to try to be good people, to enforce under the delusion that these fascists have the only answer. And so, I'm glad that you brought up Venezuela, because it's a hard sticking point on a lot of people who think that the United States is like a goody two-shoes country, and that we're always just well-meaning in everything that we do in all things. It's ludicrous. I mean, we've been playing with puppet states like Peru for a long, long time. It's part of Western heritage, like it or not. When the Western countries decided to cut up the Muslims and create Syria and create Iran and Iraq, if you look at the way that those borders run north to south, that's not the geographic distribution of the ethnic groups. And so it was done that way specifically to disempower the emerging Muslim civilization, to keep them confused, to keep them fighting. Those are artificial boundaries. I'm not saying that they need to go ahead and reconstruct and have wars over there to fix that. But I'm saying that that's within the character of Western heritage, and it's an ugly, ugly, ugly fact. And so if we're going to allow this then to happen to ourselves, where we're being divided along ideological lines. And the politicization of public health, the commoditization of our wellness and our health, and then the politicalization of public health itself should never, ever, ever happen. And so I'm going to be working in 2021 to make sure that the message gets out that there's another way to construct public health in the United States, that we can have a much better understanding that is more comprehensive, and we can start to address the real factors. If you think about it, due to misdiagnosis of coronavirus and the excess deaths that are happening due to respiratory illness, due to mistreatment, medical errors used to be the third leading cause of death. And medical errors in the United States due to coronavirus misdiagnosis, if those are counted properly, it's probably the first leading cause of death now. And that has to be addressed. And we need a public health system that will actually address that cause of death. There are far more people that will die from medical errors than will ever die from coronavirus. And yet we're thousandfold more than will ever die from coronavirus. And so we need to deal with that, frankly. We need to deal with it up front. And this is a very, very serious issue. It's like all of medicine is becoming public health. Public health people in government are servants. They're not dictators. They don't have power. They are not elected in most cases. They are appointed. And yet they're acting as though they are the be-all and end-all of how we're going to live and run our lives. If Americans put up for this is not the America that I want. And so we're going to have to change it. We're going to have to actually restructure public health from the bottom up. And I'm all for it. I have a paper that's it survived peer review and is going to be published, and it deals with this, and I hope everybody looks for that. But I want to give you a few moments to wind it down, Nadera, with your final thoughts, please.
Okay. Well, based on what you were saying, I feel compelled to share with everybody. I agree with you. I think we need to come together and have these conversations. And at the end of the day, when it comes to talking to your public officials, I think it's very prudent upon us to remember that there's a huge aspect from my personal experience of advocacy for over 3 years. To meet those individuals where they're at is very, very important. So, and remembering that once upon a time, I was in their shoes. I was very ignorant about all this evidence. And I don't say that in an undermining way. I don't mean it in any way, because what's ignorance except not knowing, right? And that's not necessarily our fault. So we have to remember what it is like to go back to that place and be able to have those conversations, and then quite frankly hope that those seeds sprouts and grow from there. And from our personal experience in Ohio, we've had a lot of successes as such. And one of the things that helps is starting by asking, why is it that you feel this way? Because if you don't get that answer first, you don't know where to go from there. You don't know where they stand. And that is, I think, as a human being, especially now during a time where we're so polarized and when it comes to opinions and so forth. And, you cannot come and have these civil conversations. It's so rare nowadays. There is something very beautiful and sacred, and part of that humanity that connects us to be able to converse with each other openly from the heart. And you can never go wrong when you go from the heart. And don't end up ever undermine anybody's capability to understand and decipher information. If you put forth the effort, anybody who is able to read can decipher information. And I honestly, I call on everybody to empower yourselves as such, because at the end of the day, nobody's really going to be the best advocate for yourself and your loved ones than yourself. And you need that. You need that information. You need to know that you are capable.
Absolutely. So I think the winning argument for choice is, if you mandate this vaccine and hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people are killed, we're just going to have insurrection. That was the warning that I gave to ACIP. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. We're going to have riots, and they're going to lose control. But if you back off of mandates, and then people choose to take it, and then they get hurt, they took that risk themselves, and they should have They don't have no one. They have no one to blame but themselves. But if the government puts themselves in a position where they take responsibility for your health, then they are accountable. And even if they write laws to make themselves not accountable, they're still accountable. There's just because something is written as a law doesn't make it right. Okay, so this liability free baloney, vaccine companies are still liable for all that injury. They still own that liability in an ethical and moral sense, whether they will admit it, whether the government will admit it or not. They're simply not liable financially, but they still own it. And so I don't know how these people that run these vaccine companies, knowing full well that the CDC collaborated with them, that they faked the data, HPV data, absolutely misleading, coronavirus studies, overstating the safety, overstating the efficacy. I have no idea how they sleep. I suppose when they pump and dump their stock, a couple $100 million every 2 months is a solvent for solve for their wounds in their psyche, that they might be killing people. Oh well, there's risks to it. Look at all the people I'm saving. Whatever. I don't think they give it this degree of introspection, and it certainly does deserve that. So Nadera, I'm going to flash up this HPV COVID-19 Vaccine Safety Symposium again. And I want to thank you so much for gracing Unbreaking Science today. It's so nice to talk with you under any circumstances. And I'm going to put this up here, and we're going to say goodbye. Well, thanks everybody for paying attention.
Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome, my dear. Thanks for everybody that's paying attention. Please share this so that people can understand that this is happening January 10th, 2021. The 10th, 2021, 9 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. in Columbus, Ohio. Check out the Ohio Health Freedom Ohio website, and check them out on Facebook. All the details and information's there. Dr. James Lyons-Weiler signing out.